Our next guest knows a thing or two about the power of media and representation. His filmmaker parents followed him from kindergarten through high school for their film American Promise, which won a special jury prize at Sundance in 2013. Those who have seen the film may remember Idris Brewster as a precocious child, but he's now a full-blown adult, subverting traditional narratives in his own right. Here to talk about how technology can help rewrite white supremacist history is Idris Brewster, creative technologist with Movers and Shakers. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm curious about what your experience being filmed throughout your entire childhood. How did that lead to what you're doing today?
Being filmed throughout my childhood was something that a lot of people think was a lot for me, but it was something that was kind of normal. Like when I was 5 years old, they had a camera around me, and they had a camera around some of my friends as well. And so that followed me throughout my time. And so being around a camera, speaking, was something that I'm accustomed to. But it led me to a lot of introspection, especially after the time of really thinking about me and my place in society. And so I think the movie has a really strong message about about the systemic problems in our education system today. And I was a vehicle for that message. And so I think that gave me a duty to kind of put my work moving forward to kind of further delve into that realm and create space for people like me in these spaces.
And the film was about you and your best friend as young black men sort of navigating the educational system and private schools. And I'm curious about if there were any sort of like lessons or takeaways about the power of narrative that maybe inform your work today as a creative technologist.
Power of narrative in terms of the film?
Sure, in terms of like black authorship of a narrative and about who controls what stories and about the importance of that representation.
I think that representation is extremely key. And I think the great thing about what we did in terms of me and my parents was we took control of our own narrative and framed it how we exactly wanted to frame it and get it out into the world. I think a lot of people of color are strong content creators. We have strong stories. We have a lot of cultural capital in today's society, but we are not driving the conversation on our own narratives. And so I think an example that can be learned is people really getting out there and using different mediums to tell their own story. I think that's extremely important and valuable, and it's a key to our success moving forward, is really not relying on other people, other entities that are not of the same race and background to tell those stories, because, that's how I feel.
Tell me a little bit about the work you do with Movers and Shakers.
So at Movers and Shakers, we really use emerging technology to try to understand the past, contemplate the present, and re-envision our future. And so we want to create a bridge for people to understand that all of those are in one. And what I basically mean is that we want to use artistic expression to fuel social action. And so we use augmented reality as of right now as a medium to unearth stories of marginalized groups and people of color. And so we think that this is a very interactive and immersive medium that can facilitate change not only in our cultural institutions, but in our public spaces and in our classrooms.
And our previous guest, Ash Bacchus-Clark, who you know, was talking about some of her work that uses virtual reality. And you put on an Oculus headset and you enter this world. But augmented reality is different. So for those who may not have seen it, can you explain how it's different from virtual reality? So
virtual reality is with the headset. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people with big, clunky things on their head. They're getting better. It's getting a lot slimmer. But immersing yourself in a full virtual world where wherever you look, you see inside that digital screen is virtual reality.
Is it possible to look cool while wearing one of those headsets?
Oh, I haven't seen it to date. We're
not going to rule out the possibility.
We're definitely not going to rule out the possibility.
Right.
It's going to happen soon.
But
with technological advancements, it can happen, but not yet.
So that's virtual reality.
That's virtual reality. But augmented reality is a little bit different. It's with your phone. So imagine your phone, like you go on Snapchat or you're going to shoot a story on Instagram. That camera feed is your portal into a different world. And so through that portal, you can see different digital artifacts, 3D models that are superimposed onto the world. So let's say if I pick up my phone, open up the app, the camera comes up like Snapchat, and you can see this table. Now, I can either click my phone, and then a 3D model of Toussaint Louverture will pop up right in there, and it's like in looking through the phone, it's like he's there, and you can move the phone around, kind of see him in action, just as if he's walking on your table.
Most people may be familiar with augmented reality. If they are familiar at all, through Pokemon Go, the game where people could catch Pokemons on their phone through augmented reality.
Yeah.
But you guys are using it for a different purpose. You mentioned that you could project Toussaint Louverture right here. Tell me a little bit about how you are perhaps deepening the ways in which augmented reality is being used.
So one of the ways that we were kind of inspired for this project was kind of looking around at representation in terms of statues around New York City. So we have around 155 statues in New York City. Most of them are of men, 6 are of women. 2 of those women aren't.
6 out of 155?
Yes.
Wow.
And 2 of those are fictional women, aren't even real. And the majority of those male statues are of slave owners. And
how many of those 155 are black people?
Not many. Very little. And
Yeah.
so what the point is that the stories that our city was telling in our public spaces was a story of our past, which is important to acknowledge, but at the same time, there was no nuance around any of these statues. There was no conversations around who these men really were, what they did, and what their true effect was on society. So for someone like me and my partner, Glenn, throughout our education, it was really tough for us to even find true stories of ourselves, let alone any stories of ourselves. We did not see ourselves in our history curriculums, in our English books. In order to find out, in order to really dig deep on who we actually are and our history, we had to do a lot of research on our own time. And so through augmented reality, we think we can distill a lot of the information that people do not know and provide it to them in a very aesthetic, entertaining, and immersive way where people can really interact with the history, and not only interact with the history, but also see how that relates to our current system and our current stance today. And so I think we're trying to uplift narratives that aren't traditionally told.
And you do that by enabling people to place 3D monuments through augmented reality in their world. Is that right?
So it's twofold. Our AR Monuments project is going to be an augmented reality tour where people can go around certain historic sites around New York City, open up their phone, and be able to see into a different world. So they wouldn't be placing it, it would be there. If they went to Columbus Circle, which was the place of hot protest, which we were creating campaigns around for a long time, you would go to Columbus Circle, open up your phone, and see a certain monument of a specific person of color that we want to highlight. Mm-hmm. And so it's forcing people, when they're at the physical place, it's tying the digital to the physical. So when they're at that physical spot, then they can interact with our technology.
So talk to me. It sounds like your project is actually trying to add detail and nuance to Columbus's legacy in a way that the city declined to do.
Exactly. No, we're taking it into our own hands. We want to create change, and we cannot rely on the systems in place to do that for us. And so that's why we use augmented reality. It's a way to democratize access to these narratives.
So the idea is that if you can't get governments to physically remove offending monuments, that you're at least going to supplement and tell the history that isn't implicit in the actual structure of the oppressor.
Yeah, we're just trying to do it and trying to do it on our own terms. And we're not really asking for permission. We're just going ahead and doing it. Tell
me a little bit about the show that you are involved in. You're both curating, and your work with movers and shakers is going to be represented. It's called Black Mirrors.
Yes. So on February 16th is the grand opening of our pop-up, Black Mirrors.
Great name.
Thank you. Thank you. Black Mirrors, Reimagining Reality. And so we took that as a place to really show our day-to-day life, how we're interacting with the crazy world around us. And so we wanted to showcase Black experiences, Black narratives.
One thing that we talked about with Ash was about how a lot of the people doing the design work are not coming from communities of color. And so if somebody is creating the platform that then you can go and tell your own story, you may still encounter problems because the platform itself was not built with communities of color in mind.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have feelings about that or if that applies to your work, but it sounds like you guys are forging new pathways with like augmented reality. And I'm just curious about your thoughts about the role of Black technologists in reclaiming our own stories.
I think right now there's a lot of the technologies is being used to actively persecute our communities. And a lot of it is silent. A lot of the work being done against us is silent algorithms, racial prejudice in our policing systems, our facial recognition algorithms that can't recognize Black faces. Like, these are all things that come because we are not in those rooms creating those algorithms. A lot of people think that data, algorithms, technology is some objective scientific fact, but it is not.
It's programmed by a human.
It is programmed by a human.
Often a white human.
Often a white human. It's mirrors of our reality today. Algorithms are just subjective processes, and I think that if we're not in those rooms creating those algorithms, they're going to be used. The powers that be will use those against us, and so we need to arm ourselves with these. We need to arm ourselves with these tools of the future. I mean, sometimes I have trouble seeing people of color's space in the future, and that worries me a lot. And so I think that's why it drives my work to build a better future for us. Algorithms are opinions basically embedded in code. And so we don't exist in a vacuum. All of these algorithms, all these technologies are being created by majority white males who are trying to keep power. And so I think that we need to acknowledge that our data is being used as a socio-political and cultural weapon against us. And I think that needs to change.
If you don't like your current reality, augment it.
Exactly.
Idris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.